Sometimes they say, I want to want, but then what's in it for me? Because they haven't experienced the beauty of sexuality, because it
They
comes
have
with
not.
pain.
Oh, so many things to say about what you just said. Okay, so
Yeah,
first let's
I
talk
see
about
it, Lance. Yeah.
let's talk about arousal as an altered state of consciousness. Arousal, just like labor, is a trance state.
I'm so happy today to welcome Sheri Winston. I've been following you and I've been advising my women to read your book, Women's Anatomy of Arousal. And I'm so happy to have you here. And I just, yeah, welcome, Sheri. Thank you for agreeing to be here with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
And I just introduce you because some people might not know you. I expect everyone knows you, but the world is
Not
big.
quite.
Yeah. So Sheri is a groundbreaking award-winning author, and she teaches and empowers erotic education. And you really focused on female female erotic education and how women can experience more pleasure in their bodies. And so Sheri wrote a book, Women's Anatomy of Arousal and Succulent Sexcraft. I love the name. Your hands-on guide to erotic play and practice. And she's also the founder of the Intimate Arts Center. And she offers pleasure-centered sex ed for grown-ups, which I really love. Huh? We need more pleasure. And I know that's what I'm really interested to ask you more about, that you're not just a sexuality teacher, but you come from being a nurse and a midwife and a gynecology practitioner, registered nurse. So you have a lot of background education in the area and you put the pleasure on top of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So
You
I
know, I
want to,
mean,
yeah.
I'll just mention though also, I also teach men too. So it's,
Okay.
although there's a large focus on women, I've got almost as many men who've come to my classes, and many of the things I teach are applicable to anyone of any gender. Although I definitely have a special place in my heart for teaching women and teaching everybody about women's bodies and how they operate and our equipment and what we actually have and how it works and how to make it happy.
Yeah, yeah. And I wonder, like, because it's such, we don't talk much about sexuality and pleasure, right? So I wonder, what was your journey that actually took you? And because like, I talk about sexuality and pleasure, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a bit on the edge. So I wonder what brought you on this journey.
I mean, it's funny because I talk about it all the time. So I'm used to talking about it all the time. And I have to remind myself that most people don't talk about sex all the time. It's funny. I was hanging out with somebody after a class or workshop. She said, I love hanging out with you because you talk about sex like it's normal. Yeah,
Yeah.
part of being human, part of being an animal. So, yeah, let me tell you a little bit about how I came to be a
When
holistic
it,
sexuality teacher.
yeah, when it
Uh,
became normal, huh? Because I wonder if it was normal all the time, or was it a journey? Yeah.
well, for me, I mean, I grew up in a fairly sex positive household. So I didn't grow up with a lot of shame about bodies or sex. And so I didn't have to overcome those kind of early childhood prohibitions and ideas that a lot of people do. But well, actually, first I went to art school and then I said, well, that's a silly way to try to make a living. And then I became a massage therapist and I knew I was going to go into some kind of healing art. I was considering becoming a doctor and I was considering becoming a midwife. Those were sort of the two
Mm.
things. I also considered going into different kinds of body work, maybe becoming a chiropractor. So those were the paths I was looking at. And then had a client who was pregnant and loved getting massages from me, and she invited me to her home birth.
Oh,
She figured, yeah, that's who you want at your home birth, somebody who
of
will massage
course.
you the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So I went to my first home birth. I was 19 or 20, and it was the sky opened up, and the
Oh,
goddess looked down at me and said, this is the path,
wow.
becoming a wife. So I became a childbirth educator. I apprenticed with a bunch of different home birth midwives. And then I decided I wanted to get legal. And unfortunately, in the United States, we're so stupid about these things. In the United States, in order to be a legal midwife, pretty much, There's some exceptions, but mostly you have to become a nurse first. You have to be a registered nurse with a bachelor's degree, so a 4-year
Wow.
nursing degree. Then you have to work in the field for a while, and then you go to midwifery school for another couple of years of education.
It's a long
So it took
process.
me a while to decide to do that because I didn't actually want to be a nurse. I wanted to be a
Mm.
midwife, but then I decided, all right, I'll do it. So I
That's a
did that.
commitment, huh?
Hmm?
That's a commitment.
It was a commitment. Yeah, it was about 6 years altogether. So I did all that. And at the end, I came out and I was a certified nurse midwife and gynecology practitioner. And so the next, 20 years or so were really dedicated to women and birth and women's health and with a holistic perspective, because I had already come from outside the medical system and herbs and alternative healing, things like that.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I did home birth for a number of years, got kind of burnt out on the home birth thing because it's a lot of work for the midwife. And then I worked in a birth center for the last 5 years, and then I was kind of burnt out. And along with teaching childbirth classes, I had started teaching what I called women craft classes, which were about things like menstrual health, vaginal ecology. It was basically the things I was teaching
Oh,
women in the exam room with my patients. And then I was like, instead of saying this, 20 times a day to individual women, I'll teach a class and talk to 20 women at the same time.
women craft. I
So
love it.
yeah, so along with this, so there's this sort of parallel journey. So I was teaching women how to have awesome births. So I was, constantly learning and then teaching things like how to use your breath and sound to
Mm.
enhance your birth experience. I learned things like the state of labor, the biochemical state is a trance state, and how to help women enhance that trance. I learned things about how to use your mind, how to use your pelvic floor muscles. So I was teaching all that stuff. Now, meanwhile, what I didn't really, sex for me had just gotten better and better. It got easier to get
Rise,
aroused.
huh?
I was easier to have orgasms. I could have more orgasms and then even more orgasms. And I just thought that was normal. That's what happened for all women. But as I started teaching these classes and talking to women, I started to realize that's not actually what happens with all women. It isn't just that I had a great husband and we were having great sex. I had an epiphany where I realized that I had been training myself to have better sex. In all this teaching I was doing, here's how you use your pelvic floor muscles and sound and breath, and I was unconsciously utilizing that to have
Mm.
better sex. At that point, I kind of went, wow, well, if I got this far without really trying, what happens if I start studying this? And so I
Oh,
started
that's
going to
interesting, huh?
classes about Tantra classes and Taoist sexuality, and studied some Native American sexuality practices and sort of Western, sexology studies. And it's funny because I thought I was doing that for me. I was
Of
just doing that
course.
so I would have
Yeah.
better sex
Yeah,
and
of course.
for my husband, that he would have better sex. But what I realized is I was taking the things I learned in sex world and
Mm.
bringing it into birth world. That the things I was learning there to have better sex were helping me be a better midwife and helping my patients have better births. And I started to realize it's not two separate things at all.
So connected, huh?
One integral. So when I got burnt out on catching babies, I was around 40, and I thought I was just going to take a break. And then I would go back in 6 months or a year, maybe start a new home birth practice, whatever. And meanwhile, I was working in a clinic as a clinician, just doing like gynecology and prenatal care, but no births. And after about a year, I realized that I didn't want to go back, that I felt complete. And I was thinking, well, what do I want to do now? Do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? Because I love taking care of women, but I wasn't like waking up like, oh, great, I go to the clinic today. So meanwhile, I'd been teaching all these classes, and I added a class for women about how to have orgasms and how to have better orgasms. And when I woke up on the day that I was teaching, I was like so juiced up and jazzed that, oh, good, I'm getting to teach this class. And then my men friends said they wanted to come. And I'm like, you can't come, it's just for women. And they're like, yeah, but we want to know. We want to be good partners. We want to help our partners have better sex. And I'm like, well, all right, I'll teach a class for guys about female sexuality. And that was so much fun. Oh my gosh. It was like this room full of men listening to every word.
Yeah. It's like, you know what you're talking about. It's like you're following your pleasure, right? You're so
Mhm.
focused on pleasure, and you were following your pleasure, and you brought so
Yeah,
much to the world. It's like, wow.
it's absolutely true. I followed my bliss and I had faith and I just kept walking towards it. And then I added another class and another class and another class. And each one led to some other class. And I started doing professional trainings for healthcare providers and so forth. And over the course of about 5 years, I'd expanded my curriculum and I cut down my time in the clinic and I cut it down and I cut it down. And after 5 years, I stopped that job. I quit that job and I was a full-time holistic sexuality teacher.
This is so
And
cool.
that's how I made that transition. And then along the way, I wrote a couple of books and here I am. And I made up the title holistic sexuality teacher because there was no good title for what I did.
Hmm.
You know, if I said I was a sex ed teacher, people assumed I taught in a school,
Yeah.
right? They assumed I taught, whatever, adolescents or something. And
Yeah.
while I do occasionally, have done some programs for younger people, I predominantly teach adults. And also, I really am coming from a holistic perspective that sex isn't separate from anything. It's part of who we are.
It's really part of us, huh? Yeah. And I
And
wonder
that's
because you know
exactly.
you talk about that piece, and I've got your book here. I love your book. And
Thank you.
I'm giving it to women. But you talk about the altered state of consciousness. And
Uh-huh.
I wonder if we can talk a little bit about that, because I guess women that come to me, right, they lack sexual desire and they
Hmm.
want. Yeah. But
Yeah.
sometimes
Okay.
they say, I want to want, but then what's in it for me? Because they haven't experienced the beauty of sexuality, because it
They
comes
have not.
with pain. It's like, so I wonder.
Oh, so many things to say about what you just said. Okay, so
Yeah,
first
I see it, Lance. Yeah.
let's talk about arousal as an altered state of consciousness. Arousal, just like labor, is a trance state. In fact, they're almost the same trance state. And when we are in a trance state, an altered state of consciousness, things change.
Mm,
Time changes, sensation changes, our awareness, what we're aware of. And once we understand arousal as an altered state of consciousness, then we can learn how to do things to enhance our trance. And humans have been playing with trance states forever,
mm,
right? And religious and spiritual things, but it can also, it can be dancing, it can be singing, it can be praying or chanting. Those are all altered states of consciousness. Reading a book, watching TV, those are altered states of consciousness. So there are altered states that kind of zone us out, like watching TV,
mm.
or there are altered states that make us more intensely aware, like the arousal trance. Okay, so once we realize, oh, I can enhance this trance. I can get myself deeper into the trance. I can get higher in my arousal, then it becomes easier to get turned on, easier to have orgasms, easier to expand your orgasmic capacity. So that's sort of that piece. But now desire is a different animal.
Mm.
So there's a number of factors. We have a lot of women who their libido is depressed. They don't desire.
Mm.
It could be because you just had a baby. It could be because you're postmenopausal. It could be because you're on some kind of medication. It could be that you're depressed. It could be that you're in a relationship that's not really healthy for you and isn't turning you on. It could be that you're just bored.
Mm.
So there's a lot of things that can suppress desire. But we also can have conscious choice about desire. So I'll say for myself as a postmenopausal woman, my libido is not the same as it was
Yeah.
prior to menopause.
Mm.
And I could well, first I could whine and complain and moan about it. I could just ignore it and go, oh, I don't even care if I ever have any sex anymore. My husband wouldn't be very happy about that.
No, that's what happens, huh?
But also arousal and orgasm are good for us
Hmm. Talk to
and
us about that.
help keep us healthy and vital and juicy and happy. Pleasure is really good for us. So I wouldn't be doing myself a service either if I never went down that road. But what I need to do now, and what anyone could do at any point when the desire is not just activated by itself, is I can choose to go there. I can say, it's been a while. I think I want to go get turned on and then do the things that turn me on. And once I'm in a state of arousal, I'm very happy I went there. But I had to choose it. I had to make a
The
conscious choice.
conscious choice, huh?
Yeah. Now, I'll say there's another piece of this puzzle, which is about long-term relationship. So when we first meet someone and we fall madly in love and we're madly in lust, like, no, but we don't need to work at it. It's just
No,
there.
it's
And
easy.
it's easy. It's so easy, right? What happens over some time? Well, there are actual biochemicals that create the state. It's called limerence. Love that word, limerence, the state of falling in love. And I think, and we get maximum 4 years for that, of those
Deliverance. Okay.
particular biochemicals. Now, I think of that as the training wheels, because what we can do when we've got that natural juice flowing is we can learn how to be great lovers, great partners, and the things we can do to keep the energy happening. Conscious choice again. Because what happens when we're with somebody for a long time, they become familiar,
Hmm.
they become like family, and we are biologically programmed to not want to have sex with our family.
That makes sense, huh?
So again, we've got conscious choice around that. And it's interesting. The work of Esther Perel on this is really great. She
Yeah.
talks about how it's hard to desire what you already have.
Hmm.
In fact, one of the things that tends to increase desire is when you go away from each other for a little while
Distance. Yeah, that
and you
attraction
get a little
exists in the
distance,
distance and the
then
space.
you come back together and are like, oh, you, oh, I remember you. I really like you. Oh, I lust after you. So it's how do we create mystery and excitement in long-term relationship, which is also an art form, which is also a set of learnable skills. That's kind of my motto. It's all learnable,
Yeah. Well,
right?
I
We can
love it
learn.
because it's conscious choice. Because what women, I guess, women come to me and there's a sense of kind of being disempowered. It's all up to, their partner to turn them on somehow. And there's
Yes.
all that conscious choice and they feel like, well, he doesn't do it for me or she doesn't do it for me. And that's the
Yeah.
end of it.
Yeah.
Rather than actually I can choose and turn myself on and bring
Yeah.
myself to the party.
Exactly. And in fact, that cultural myth that it's our partner's job to turn us on and give us orgasms is so damaging to everyone. It's not
Horrible,
fair to
huh?
them.
It's
It's
just so
not fair to
horrible.
them.
Oh,
They don't have a little booklet. It's,
no.
here's the Sheri booklet. It says how exactly to turn her on. Not only that, most men and women are wired differently when it comes to erotic energy and
Mm,
arousal.
mm.
Um, and so we need to understand ourselves, what turns me on, what arouses me, what stimulates me, what gets me going, what gets me to orgasm. I need to know that.
Mm.
And then ideally, we have a partner that we teach who learns. And we learn them and they learn us and we learn from each other. And that we keep learning, that it's an ongoing process, that we're creating a learning relationship together. And I think that's the key to making long-term relationships last and be joyful and pleasurable, is we've got to be in this learning mindset.
I
I
love
mean,
that. Yeah.
because things change.
Things change. And I talk about it as not even a relationship, but intimate relating as a process, but the learning, the curiosity, because I think that's what happens. We think I know this person and that's the end of it. I know myself, that's the end of it, but that's never
Yeah.
the end. It's like it's always growing.
Wouldn't it be boring if we just stayed the same?
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, look, when I was When I was 20 years old, I was going out dancing all night. I'm not doing that now at however old I am. And that's okay. I wouldn't want to, first of all, I don't have that much energy, but I wouldn't want to be spending my life going out dancing all night. I
Mm,
would rather be doing other things. And sure, it's okay if you just want to go out dancing all night, but I think it's important to recognize and not feel bad about the changes,
mm.
right? I could feel really terrible. Oh, I don't have the energy to go dancing all night. Wah, wah, wah. Or I could go, well, I still love to dance. I just don't have to go out dancing all night. And I don't have to go out at midnight like I used to do. I could go out at 8 o'clock at night
But
and
it's
be home in
almost
bed
like
by midnight.
what you talk about is that pleasure doesn't have to go, right? It can take a
Yeah.
different form, but the pleasure can always, because that's what women feel like, right? Well, now I'm too old and there's no pleasure in life.
Yeah, well, these are choices,
Mm,
often unconscious, but let's make them conscious. And and finding ways to have pleasure within the framework of what you're now capable of.
mm,
Like, go out dancing earlier,
yeah.
come home and be in bed by midnight.
Mm,
And I think the same goes with sex. I mean, it's not like I never have marathon sex anymore, but it's less likely. Because honestly, I don't have 5 hours of energy anymore. Or although occasionally, things are happening and it goes on and that's great. But I could again, I could bemoan that, or I could go, well, let's make what we have awesome. Even if it's only an hour. An hour is a long time.
yeah.
Even if it's only 10 minutes.
Mm,
But yeah, we need to take responsibility,
I love
I
that. I'm
think.
making choice and staying kind of on pleasure and connection. Yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder, so in your view, is there still misconceptions about female anatomy? Like, why is it important for women to know it? How do you see it in like now in the world, in the modern world?
Okay. Well, this is like my big, most heart-centered mission.
Yeah.
We do not have an accurate map of female genitalia. As you know, you've read my book, so you know, but the information that's in my book about the parts that women actually have, where they are, how they're connected, how they work together, is just not out there in the world. You can look at all the other textbooks and sex books and anatomy books, and they're not going to have all those parts. And they're not going to have that understanding of how they connect and how they work together. And so this is kind of like playing the piano, but you think there are only 22 keys on the piano. Then suddenly somebody's like, oh no, there's 88 keys and there's foot pedals. And they're like, no, wait, it's an organ. There's lots of keys and lots of pedals and lots of buttons. But if we don't know what we have, how are we going to know how to play with it and make it happy? And how are we going to teach our lovers what they need to know to pleasure it and make it happy? And also we don't have a good, so first of all, the anatomy piece. We can come back to that if you want, because I could talk about that one for a while.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I will also say I don't think we have a good understanding of how most women's sexual energy operates.
Okay, let's talk about
Um,
this. So, because I wanted to ask,
that
yes. Yeah.
okay. But let's get back to the anatomy at some point.
Okay.
Good deal.
Okay.
Okay, so here's one of my favorite models. And that is that female sexual energy is pussycat energy and male sexual energy is puppy dog energy, right? I mean, we call it a pussy for a reason. Right? We say men are dogs for a reason. So what I'm talking about is also in the sort of the tantra perspective is yin, or the Taoist perspective is yin and yang. Female, feminine, erotic energy, that pussycat energy, it's about opening and receiving. And the puppy dog yang energy is about that active doing, putting out, putting in. So let me expand on that a little. Okay, so you come over my house and you want to make friends with my pussycat. I got a couple of them lying around here. Do you just run up to the kitty cat and grab it and try to rub its tummy?
No,
No,
that
because the
wasn't
cat's
gonna go
gonna
well.
you're gonna be bleeding and the cat's gonna run away and you're not gonna get close to that cat again. How do we make friends with the pussycat? Well, first we create connection, right? We get their attention. And then we approach them at the right speed. What's the right speed? Their speed. How do we know we're looking at their body language? Are they opening or are they tensing and withdrawing? And if we go at the right speed, at some point, we get to pet the pussycat. Do we go right for the vulnerable tummy? No, right? We need to seduce the pussycat. We have to show the cat, I know how to give you pleasure and I'm safe. Those both. And then what do we do with the kitty cat? We start with the less vulnerable spots, right? We rub their ears. Oh, they like that. And then they'll let us rub under their chin. And if we take our time and we go at the right pace, the pussycat's pace, then sooner or later we'll get the purring puddle of pussy that we're after. But if we go a little bit too fast and they tense up a little bit, it's going to take 2 times as long to get them to relax again. If we go too fast again, it's going to take 10 times as long for
I
them to
love that, huh? It's
Yeah.
such a good metaphor. It's like, yeah,
Isn't it? It's so true.
beautiful.
This is how most women's erotic energy is. It starts out here in the story, in the context, in the connection. We need to feel safe. And then our erotic energy is watery and it's got to kind of flow past all our other energy centers. It's got to go past our thinking and past our communication and our heart and our power center. It's got to come up past our root chakra, which is our safety chakra, our connection down there. And then it gets to our genitals. And for most women, most of the time, that's going to take 30 to 45 minutes, which is longer than most people are having a sexual encounter for. Now, conversely, puppy dog energy. Okay, so if my husband hops out of the shower naked and I grab a hold of his dick, is he happy?
He's happy.
Happy, right? If I hopped out of the shower naked and he grabbed my crotch, would I be happy? My energy doesn't start there, it has to go there. His erotic energy, like most men, starts in his sex centers, in his genitals, and the sex centers in his brain, through his eyes, usually, right? That's how men's sexual energy starts. So, but if we're going on our cultural model of arousal and a sexual encounter, unfortunately, our culture has mostly shown us a male-centered model. That's what we see in porn. They get right to it, right? They haven't actually shown you the 45 minutes that the woman has used the vibrator to get warmed up. They don't show you that part. They just show you that let's get to it, let's get it in, let's do it, let's be quick, let's fast and
This
furious.
achievement, kind of really like that achievement, like our culture is so focused on achieving, and it's almost like the orgasm is the goal, and we get there as fast as we can.
That's a male-centered model.
Yeah.
So instead of enjoying the journey and taking our time and enjoying the whole body and all the wonderful pleasures we can get from everything, we're so genitally focused because, again, for most puppy dog people, for most male-centered sexual energy people, that's where the energy starts. So that's what they think is the right thing to do because that's what works for them. And unless somebody has taught them, it's not what works for me. We're always going to be missing that connection that comes from when we are really in tune with our partner.
And do you see women going into the puppy dog energy? Like, so it's not just women and men. Is it male and female energy more?
Well, here's what I would say. So most of us have one or the other core erotic energy. And for most women, it's our yin our central energy, that receptive, opening receptive energy. And our yang is our secondary complementary energy. It's our guardian and our warrior, right? And it's that active part. And it's in reverse for most men, most of the time. But sometimes I am in a puppy dog mood and I'm going to want to take my partner and toss him on the bed and jump on him and be the more aggressive, active partner. But more often, 75% of the time or 90% of the time, I want him to throw me on the bed. I want him to be that more assertive, aggressive partner. Now, some people are wired opposite of what you would think. When I say most women, then that means there are some women who really are puppy dog energy people. And there are some men who are much more pussycat people. There are some people who are 50-50 who could literally go either way energetically. And then also, this is how we tend to be when it comes to sex, not how we are in the rest of our lives, right? I've run my own business for years. That takes a lot of yang energy.
Yeah.
Right? I've got to have, initiative and drive and be assertive and get things done. And, and we also have this sort of cultural stereotypes that when women are like that, we're ball busters or we're domineering. But if you're going to run a company, you got to have some of that energy, whether our culture thinks it's appropriate for women or not. So how I am out in the world might be different from how I am in the bedroom, and it often
I
is.
love that. I love that there's a flexibility around it, right? It's not just this is how it
Yeah.
is. It's a flexibility and it's all unique to everyone. So
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong. It's just we just run different energies and we need to
In
use
different circumstances. When I'm teaching, I've got to be balanced. I'm putting information out there. I'm in service. I'm giving. I'm penetrating people with my ideas.
Love that
I'm
word.
also receptive. I'm listening. I'm
Yeah.
aware of what's going on. I'm paying attention. I'm getting questions and comments. So I have to be receptive. Right. So sex is where we tend to be most polarized. And then in other areas of our life, maybe we're balanced or maybe we're the opposite. But definitely when it comes to sex, I'm going to say 90% of people, one of those energies is stronger than the other. And the other thing that's important to understand about this model is we need that secondary energy. So if I was all yin all the time, I'd be a doormat. This is people who are in abusive relationships, too much yin energy. They open when there's love, they close when there's violence, but they don't have that secondary yang, that warrior that protects them. They don't have that get up and go, right? And for male people, their core yang energy needs to be balanced and mitigated with yin. So when that happens, when you've got core yang and a beautiful balancing yin, you've got the service dog, right? A seeing eye dog. That's the high masculine, where they are in service. They are penetrating the world with their gifts. They're using their initiative and attention to be in service. What happens when we have yang energy not mitigated by yin? We get rapists.
Then it gets tough.
We get abusers, right? And again, unfortunately, I think a lot of our cultural male modeling is of that unmitigated yang energy. And what we really want to put out there is, the masculine is beautiful when it's doing its job, right? And in the bedroom, what that means is that whoever's holding that more yang energy at that moment is really in service to their yin partner and their partner's pleasure.
And kind of hold the safety, right? Because that's the piece of the safety. When you have that energy, you hold the safety.
Yes, and keep things keep things moving, give directionality. It's like, driving a car.
It's like, I love you just say it. My body goes like, oh yes.
Right. So if I wasn't going to let you drive my car, I've got to trust that you're going to do it safely.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can't relax. Right. And then if I can relax, if I know you're a good driver and you might take me somewhere I've never been before, but you're not going to drive off the road. You're not going to drive off a cliff, right? That's what we want from the masculine. We want that. But then, the masculine people, the young, the puppy dogs, they need to understand how yin energy operates if they're going to seduce, tease, coax, take their time, enjoy the journey, and get that pussycat to totally surrender.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what ecstasy is, right? It's surrender into bliss. And we can't do that if we don't feel safe.
Yeah, and that's where that safety is and pleasure just so connected, huh? Yeah. Beautiful. You wanted to come back to the anatomy?
I do.
I've got one more question, but okay, let's come back to the anatomy.
Is the question about the masculine, feminine energy stuff?
No, it's more about, it's a different. Let's talk about the anatomy.
Okay.
Whatever
We'll do a little anatomy, then we'll go to your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. Women's genital anatomy that you would find in most books is missing important parts. They usually have some things that are just incorrect, that are just wrong. And it's like a bad map, so if I heard about this great swimming hole off in the woods, but I don't have a map, so I just go wandering around and maybe I never find the swimming hole. So then I get a map and I go, oh, great, I'm going to find it now. And I follow the map and I still don't find it. So what are women thinking? They're thinking, there's something wrong with me. They're not thinking, this map sucks. This map is wrong. So when we
I
don't,
love that. This is so important. It's not that something's wrong with me, but
yeah,
it's the map that sucks. And it doesn't mean that just the anatomy, but maybe the whole process or something is not working, but it's not about me.
yeah, yeah, because a lot of women feel really broken.
They do, yeah.
They do, the statistic is still that 10% of women have not yet found their path to orgasm. And I would say most of them feel like there's something wrong with them instead of
Mm,
saying, you just never got a good map. There's some stuff
mm,
you haven't learned yet. You can learn.
mm,
You can
mm,
totally learn. Here's the map. Here's how to follow the map. Here's how it operates. Here's what your instrument is made of. Here's how you play your instrument.
mm.
And then they'll find what they're looking for. And then of course we've also got a pretty large number of women who have orgasms sometimes, but not all the time. They haven't developed orgasmic proficiency. And then, of course, after proficiency, we can develop orgasmic mastery, right? Which is a whole other conversation. But back to the anatomy for a minute. If we don't know what we have, how are we going to play that instrument? So, without going into all of the details and the parts, in summary, I would say that what's important for people to know is about erectile tissue. So, erectile tissue is a specialized bodily tissue that can become engorged. We know about penises. We know they start out small and soft, and under the right circumstances, they get big and hard. That's because they're getting engorged. They're filling up with blood, gets trapped in there. Now, what I was taught was that I had a clitoris. And actually, the part that most books are talking about when they say the clitoris is just one part of a
Yes,
three-part
so bright,
structure,
yeah. Mm.
right? So people are talking about the head of the clitoris. Now, this is a great part. It's an awesome thing. It's the tip of the volcano. We've got a network of structures, connected structures that are all made out of erectile tissue. So pound for pound, inch for inch, female bodies have just as much of that arousable, engorgeable, expandable erectile tissue. But if we don't know where it is and we're not playing with it, and our partners don't know where it is and they're not playing with it, we're not going to get that full engorgement and full arousal that leads to the biggest, best arousal, the biggest, best orgasms, the easiest access to orgasms. And we can get aroused and orgasmic with just part of that network activated. Probably for the first 10 years I was having sex, it was all about the head of the clitoris.
Mm.
I didn't know there was anything else. And I had orgasms. It was a fine thing. There's no bad orgasms, right? They're all good orgasms. But when I started to discover all the rest of the stuff and started playing with it, my partner started playing with it when I showed them what was there. Oh my gosh, my arousal and orgasm expanded so dramatically. It's like first
Love
I was
it.
I was I was like singing a beautiful song and playing the guitar. It was beautiful. Now I've got a whole orchestra, right? The music you can make with a whole orchestra is bigger and wider and has more depth and breadth and right. So you want your whole orchestra activated when you are pleasuring yourself or playing with partners. So unless you know where all that stuff is, how are you going to play with it? Okay.
Beautiful.
So
And
that's
for
the
me, I guess
short
for my,
version.
like how I came to that when I had my second child and I didn't want to have any tears, and I really went into massaging all of the inside and opening it, and there was like pain and there was like nausea, but I persevered, and then that started to open up. But that's how it was for me through the birth.
Hmm.
And then when
Yeah.
he came out, there was no tears, no nothing.
Yeah.
But that gave me more, the pleasure in it, and I kind of started to know what it is, where it is, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, back to that sex and birth connection. One of the best ways for women who are in labor to progress is to play with themselves or let their partner play with them, not intercourse, but hands and toys, whatever. You know, when I was a midwife, I would tell my couples, I was like, go get naked and get in bed together, and nipple stimulation is great, and external genital stimulation, just go have fun. Or once I was in the birth center, I'd say, go get in the shower together. Go. I would tell
I
the
never heard
male
that.
partner,
Wow.
like bring a pair of swim trunks, because we don't want to be walking in on naked men. We don't care about walking in on naked women, but bring a pair of swim trunks, and then so they could get in the shower. And then I was instrumental in getting birthing tubs into the birth center. So at first I would have my clients could rent a tub and set it up, and then they did a renovation and they put tubs in. And so I'd be like, get in the tub, go play with yourself. And I would always say like things like, I mean, I'll leave the room. When I come back in, I will knock and I will wait for you to tell me to come in. I won't, interrupt anything, so they feel safe and private. And it's the best way to enhance labor and get the baby out and have the least amount of pain. And some women have orgasmic births.
Mm.
So I mean, the first time I saw that was at a home birth, and I didn't know such a thing was possible. I had no idea. And this woman is in labor and sounds like she's having, orgasms in labor. And then like this big orgasm when the baby was born. I didn't interrupt. I didn't have sense not to do that. But afterwards I was like, were you having orgasms? She's like, yeah. I'm like, right. And then I started like finding out that there's like this thing that happens. And while you can't make it happen, I know one woman who had 6 kids and had 1 orgasmic birth, but the other ones didn't turn orgasmic. So you don't always know, but you can do things to enhance the chance that will happen. So,
Yeah, beautiful.
like cool things to know, right?
It's quite, well, yeah, I mean, that's what I went for, and it didn't happen for me, but it was a beautiful experience. It was very expanded, and it was an amazing experience. And my partner, he was just touching my back, and that was such an intense pleasure.
Oh, nice. One of the reasons our vaginas can open up enough to let a baby out is because of all that erectile tissue, because it's really stretchy. And when it's engorged, it gets stretchier. So that's probably why you didn't have any tears, because you were.
Yeah, but no one ever told me like you can actually pleasure yourself, or your partner can pleasure you. It's like, wow.
Wow.
She'll have another child.
Yeah, I'll have another one just so I can try them. I know, I thought about that at times. No, it's not a good reason.
Okay, I can talk to you. You're so amazing to talk to. I love it. I guess maybe if you can just say this little bit, because some women come, right, and they come from trauma and they come from that closed state. What would be the first step for them to actually start to open up a bit? Because I know when we come from, not from a really difficult backgrounds, right? But some people do come from really difficult backgrounds, and the whole system is closed and they can't even think of pleasure. What would be the first step?
So in this day and age, we have a lot of information about trauma-informed therapy, trauma-informed body work, and so forth. And so I think for people who have had trauma, particularly sexual trauma, it can be very, very useful to work with someone. You don't have to figure out this healing journey on your own. I've known people who've had insane, horrendous trauma who've come through it and become very sexually empowered and free. And just, it's such a beautiful thing to see when you know what they've overcome. And pretty much, I would say universally, they've worked with other people to help them get there. So, we've got this weird thing like you should do it yourself and pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And if you've had trauma, get help.
Get help.
So I think the first step is find guides. It doesn't have to be a therapist. Trauma-informed body worker can be amazing. In the ideal world, we would have therapists who also did somatic work. And there are some who, because it's not just about talking, you also have to address the animal body. And you can teach your animal body that you are creating safety for yourself, that other people can help create safety. And so I think what we need to do for ourselves, first of all, start with yourself. Don't necessarily expect to heal this with a sexual partner. Your solo sex is your foundational erotic relationship. You are your primary partner. You are the only one that you've been with your whole life and you're going to be with your whole life. So start with your solo sex, and your solo sex is your healing place. It's your sacred temple. It's your rejuvenation spa. It's your rehearsal hall. It's good exercise. It's good for, depression and anxiety. It's good for everything. So your solo sex is really important. So start by creating, what do you need for your own safety? Do you need a lock on your door? Put a lock on your door, right? Maybe you have kids and you're worried your kids are gonna, just come in. Great, put a little hook and eye on your door. Like, create safety physically, create safety mentally and emotionally. Maybe you need to do some your solo sex practices while your kids are at school, right? Maybe you just can't relax when they're in the house. So think about what it is you need to do. We need to reprogram our minds. And there's a whole bunch of techniques for doing that, but noticing our negative thoughts and replacing them with 3 simple positive thoughts. So maybe, we have a session where we're just like, all we can think about is, I'm so broken. Maybe that's a thought you have. I'm never going to get over it, those kinds of things. So start by kind of noticing those negative thoughts. And then you can do this separately from your session, but think of 3 positives. I'm whole. I am healing. I am, and not, you don't want to use a no. You don't want to say I'm not broken, because your brain just hears broken. I'm whole, I'm healing, I'm healthy. Could be your 3 positives. If you have that negative thought, like I'm never going to get better, I'm getting better every day. I'm moving towards wholeness. Every time I love myself, I'm getting better. So you just say those 3 positives over and over and over again. The best time to do this is when you're in a state of arousal.
It gets deeper.
Right? Arousal is an altered state of consciousness, so our brain is most suggestible. You don't have to do everything all at once. Start slow. You might want to start by just having a session where you put one hand on your heart and you cup your crotch with your other hand and you just breathe. And you send love messages, healing messages, guardian messages, safety messages, to yourself, to your genitals. When you feel ready, then start exploring, start self-pleasuring. At some point, if you have a partner or partners, you want to bring them in to this. You want to explain things to them. You want to have times where you sit down and you talk with your clothes on. This is my history. This is what happens. These kinds of things trigger me. These are the words that I long to hear. These are the words that make me feel safe. And then you create safety. Maybe you ask your partner to hold you while you self-pleasure, but they don't do any sexual touching. Maybe you ask your partner, could you always ask me before you touch my crotch or my boobs? Could you always ask before you do everything? Could you have check-ins? Is this okay? Are you ready for this? You have to become a great communicator with a partner about this. Sometimes a partner will see that you've just dissociated, right? One of the things people do when they've had trauma is they just leave. So I've counseled couples where, the partner will say, sometimes I can just see she's left. And then it's like, well, what do you do then? Then you stop, right? You stop any sexual activity.
Yeah.
You probably, and this is when it's good to have had check-ins before to know what would be safe. Would it be safe if I just held you? I'm just going to tell you, I'm here for you. You're safe. You don't need to do anything else. You can come back into your body. It's safe here. I had a woman in labor. When women have trauma histories, they haven't really surfaced, that they're sort of vague, but they've kind of pushed it down. Sometimes it comes up in pregnancy and labor. And I had a woman, this is just a great story. I'll have to end probably with this story, but so I had this woman in labor and she was having her 3rd baby and she came to me and she's very put together, coiffed, nice makeup, just very right. And she's having her 3rd baby and she'd had the first 2 with 2 other providers in the area. And I said, how come you haven't gone back to either of your other providers? And she says, oh, they told me I couldn't come back. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Interesting.
Right? She says, yeah, I get violent in labor. I'm like, oh, okay. So we talk about that a little. Anyway, so we get to her labor And she's doing fine. She gets to the point where it's time to start pushing. And for those who haven't had a baby, when a baby's head is moving through your vaginal canal, I think it must feel a lot like a penis would feel to a little girl. Like if you'd been
Huge
molested
piece.
as a child
Yeah.
with an adult penis,
Mm.
I think that baby's head coming through the vaginal canal probably feels a lot like that. That can be a really triggering place for people who've had trauma that involves penetration like that. So she's totally dilated, ready to push, and she just leaves. Like I could just see her check out. She's gone. And first I check all the things you check to make sure she's not going to die. Right? Like she hasn't had a stroke or something, right? So you do the safety things. But then I thought, okay, this is when she got violent in her other labors because people tried to touch her and people tried to do vaginal exams and people were telling her to push and freaking out because she wasn't. And I was like, oh, I totally get it now. And so I sat there for 2 hours and I just said to her, you're safe.
Mm.
This is a safe place and I'm a safe
Oh,
person.
oh, I get goosebumps.
You,
Yeah.
you are totally safe. You can come back whenever you're ready.
Mm.
What you're feeling is your baby's head and your vagina. That's your baby's head you're feeling.
Mm.
When you're ready, you can let the baby move down. No rush. We can just stay here until you're ready. The baby was doing fine. I would have to check the heartbeat, like I need to check the heartbeat now, but you just have to like very gentle little thing. And so I just said that over and over again. You're safe. This is a safe place. It's a safe place to have your baby. That's your baby. You're feeling your baby's head. 2 hours.
Mm.
This is in a birth center, so there's nursing staff, and I had told them to stay out of the room, and they were freaking. They were like, 2 hours. I'm like, we're
Mm.
fine, we're good. Just stay away. So 2 hours goes by, and then she just came back into her body. She had just been like, she was gone, and then she came back, and she looked at me, and she said, "I'm ready to push." Half
Beautiful.
hour later, we had a baby, and she
Wow.
didn't get violent. She didn't throw
Wow.
anything.
Wow. Beautiful.
I know. And afterwards,
Oh.
a couple days afterwards, when I was
Mm.
talking to her, I said, did you have any, in your intake, because I would always ask about that, you hadn't indicated any kind of sexual trauma, but has anything surfaced? She's like, no, no, nothing. I'm like, okay. If
Mm.
it ever does,
Mm.
you can let me know. And I've got people I can send you to.
Yeah.
And I never heard from her again about that. So who knows? But I'm totally 100% convinced
Mm.
something happened to her probably when she was a baby before memory really kicks
Mm.
in.
Mm.
And that brought that back. I could be wrong, but we had a baby and she didn't throw any bedpans or pillows at me. So
Oh, it's such a beautiful story. It touches my heart. Yeah.
I know. I know.
Um,
I get goosebumps
oh, I
still
get goosebumps like,
telling that
wow.
story, right? Because
Yeah.
trauma lives in our body, even if our
Yeah.
brain doesn't remember it.
No, we can't think it through. It just happens. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Sheri. I'd love to talk to you more and more and more. It's
We
such a
could
pleasure
totally
to
do
talk.
another one. We could do another one if you want,
Okay,
anytime,
please,
because
can we? It's just like, I guess because I feel like we need to talk about these things, and not many people talk about sexuality. And then it's all hidden. There's so much shame and guilt. And the way you talk about it, just so much pleasure and beauty. And it's like, oh, love it.
I'm gonna say one more thing. So babies that are born in an environment that isn't scary and isn't cold, where there aren't bright lights and people doing rude things to you, babies that are born that way, particularly water births, they come out ecstatic. Those babies, they're not crying. Babies are crying when they're born because they're scared, because somebody's handling them roughly or taking them away from their mommy, and they don't know what's going on. But babies that are born gently and naturally, they don't usually cry, particularly born in water. They come out and they're like,
Mm.
meow. They're like beaming, like little Buddhas, little bodhisattvas, just and of course, everyone's in the same energy field at that point. We're all ecstatic.
Mm.
Mom is ecstatic, baby's ecstatic, we're all ecstatic, everybody's in it. And that's our birthright.
Mm.
Most of us didn't get born that way,
My
right?
boy, I gave birth to my boy in a swimming pool at home, and there was,
Mm-hmm.
just swim out. I was like, wow.
Mm, exactly. So that potential for ecstasy is in us. We're hardwired to be ecstatic and have bliss and feel pleasure. And I think that that's important for people to remember.
Thank you so much. So can you tell us how can, I'll leave the notes, but how people can find you if they want to know more about?
Go to my website, intimateartscenter.com, center spelled the American way.
Mm.
And there's tons of blogs that you can read for free. I've got recorded online classes and courses. Of course, there's my books. You showed one. I've got a couple more. Let's see them back there. Yeah, I mean, really, the first thing, just go to the website and read the blogs because that's free. I really do recommend the book. I mean, there is an audio version of the book, which I got to narrate, which was so fun. And you can download a PDF of the anatomy images. But I actually recommend the physical book because it's just chock full of this gorgeous kind of vintage erotic art and illustrations. I mean, I'm an artist too, so it's a beautiful thing, the book with and of course the
And your
anatomy.
language is so beautiful. You put just, I just when it's like, it's just like, ah.
So yeah, so get the book, read the book. I'll say for penis owners, there's a short section in the back of the book, hot tips for guys, and little ones scattered throughout. So if you don't even want to read the whole book, just read that part just to get started. But really, I think anyone who owns the equipment, anyone who loves people who own the equipment, any healthcare providers who work with this equipment really need this information because there's so many ways that our healthcare is impacted, not just our pleasure, certainly our pleasure, but also our health is impacted by not having this information. And your doctors don't know it. Your midwives don't know it. Your sex educators don't know it. And we need to know. So you gotta inform yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. You're
Oh,
such a joy
you're
to
welcome. I hate
and
it's
also
it's such
yeah.
a pleasure.